Hello dear friends, you are on Ruslan Belov's channel, and this is another daily update on combat operations from the Ukrainian front. Today is a holiday. Christmas is being celebrated across Eastern Europe. Of course, one does not want to spoil anyone's mood on such a day, but let us honestly look at what is happening around us. And what is happening is the following. The United States and European countries are currently doing everything possible to derail any potential peace negotiations. The day before, a meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing took place, during which it was officially stated that France, the United Kingdom and Germany, after the end of active hostilities, that is, after a ceasefire, intend to deploy their own military contingents on the territory of Ukraine. Moreover, the United Kingdom and France separately agreed on the construction of military bases directly on Ukrainian soil. You understand perfectly well that such statements are absolutely unacceptable. This entire conflict began precisely in order to prevent the appearance of NATO troops and foreign military bases in Ukraine. And now they are openly saying, we will do this. So what kind of peace can we even talk about? What are they trying to achieve? Their goal is obvious, either to force Russia into capitulation or to continue the fighting. That is exactly what they are striving for. I congratulate everyone who is celebrating Christmas today. Despite the holiday, combat operations on the front do not stop, and we continue to closely monitor the development of the situation. So friends, as is traditionally the case during holiday weekends, there is not much news from the front line. Nevertheless, several important updates have emerged over the past 24 hours on a number of directions. These are exactly what we will go through today. But first, a brief episode. Fighters from the Vostok group, who are currently positioned north of Huliaipol, sent me video footage showing a strike on a concealed artillery position of the armed forces of Ukraine. Not only was the artillery piece itself destroyed, but also the crew operating it. The footage clearly shows the bodies of Ukrainian servicemen lying in the snow next to the gun. I would show this footage here as well, so that as many people as possible could see it, but the rules do not allow that. Therefore, follow the link in the description to my Telegram channel. There you will be able to watch the video. I uploaded it just a few minutes ago. Now let us move directly to the front. As yesterday, we will begin with the Kupiansk direction, which we examined in detail. The day before, we thoroughly analyzed a counterattack by the armed forces of Ukraine, during which Ukrainian units managed to enter the southern part of Kondrashovka. However, as I already mentioned yesterday, there was information about Russian advances, and even objective control footage appeared. According to this data, Russian units, while maintaining control over most of Kondrashovka, managed to advance westward toward the neighboring settlement of Tishchanovka. And it is important to emphasize that this was not merely a move to the outskirts of the village with partial consolidation. Russian fighters were able to enter the settlement itself and occupy its industrial zone. This sector is clearly visible and marked on the map. Such an advance is of key importance, since it is precisely here that the northern flank of Kupiansk is being formed, something the Russian army is critically in need of on this section of the front. If the offensive from the industrial zone can be developed and Tishchanovka is fully taken under control, this opens access to the railway line. From there, movement along the railway tracks and a link-up with positions near Moskovka becomes possible. As a result, the entire area could be brought back under control. With such a configuration, the front line would become far more stable than before. I would remind you that Russian troops had not previously entered Tishchanovka at all. If all of this can be implemented, the line of contact from the Oskil River would be pushed back by approximately 7.5 kilometers. Yes, given the widespread use of drones, this distance cannot be called safe. It will still be under fire and subject to strikes. Nevertheless, even so, it is significantly better than the current 4 to 5 kilometers that the Russian army has here now. Thus, we are witnessing the first truly serious attempt to change the situation by forming a reliable flank. We will see how the situation around Kupiansk itself develops further. As of January 7, 2026, fighting inside the city continues. The armed forces of Ukraine failed to achieve a blitzkrieg. Ukrainian units have become bogged down in urban combat. Assault operations on their part have been ongoing for more than a month. And despite loud statements made back in mid-December claiming that the city would be taken in just a couple of days. Reality turned out to be very different. A month has passed, and they are still very far from fully capturing Kupiansk. This, of course, does not mean that Russian forces can relax. Not at all. The attacks are heavy, and the enemy is committing large numbers of personnel and equipment. To give you a sense of the scale of the effort the armed forces of Ukraine are investing in this direction, in just 6 days of January, Russian drone operators destroyed 70 units of Ukrainian equipment. I will repeat that again. 70 units of equipment in 6 days on just this single sector of the front. This includes 2 tanks, 8 armored combat vehicles, and 3 artillery pieces. The scale of the losses is impressive. Nevertheless, despite such efforts, Russian units continue to hold their positions in the city. The chances of holding Kupiansk in the long term without proper and stable logistics remain relatively low. However, given that work has begun to expand the zone of control along the flanks, one can say that a light at the end of the tunnel is beginning to appear. Let us move on. Units operating in the area of responsibility of the Dnipro grouping continue to deliver encouraging advances. The defense of the armed forces of Ukraine on the Zaparisia direction continues to deteriorate rapidly. Let us look at what has been achieved over the past 24 hours. First, the so-called pocket between Lukianivske and Russian positions west of Pavlivka has been closed. Second, and most importantly, Russian units managed to break through Ukrainian defenses on the approaches to Novoyakovlivka. Strong points were taken, fighters entered the settlement itself and occupied almost its entire western part. This advance is of enormous significance, since there are not many settlements on the Zaporizhia direction, and control over any of them provides a substantial advantage. If the Russian army manages to fully take Novoyakovlivka, then with this front configuration, the armed forces of Ukraine will no longer be able to hold Pavlivka. It will also fall. After that, an open space stretching up to 10 kilometers all the way to Orikivka will emerge. Let us even measure this distance for clarity. There are indeed more than 10 kilometers of virtually open terrain here. Any fog could allow Russian units under its cover to make a rapid push across this entire depth. So what is the main concept on this axis? The primary objective is to form a western pincer to bypass Orikiv. From the southern side, Ukrainian defenses remain solid, and no matter how many attempts are made to break through them, they produce no results. As a result, the decision was made to maneuver around the flanks. From the west, the Dnipro grouping is forming the pincer, while from the east, the Vostok grouping is advancing. Reports are already coming in that Russian units have reached the outskirts of Zaliznikne and Stara Ukrainka. My forecast remains unchanged. If hostilities continue, Orikiv will come under Russian control by May 1st. It may even happen earlier, but May 1st is the latest deadline I am setting for myself. Operations are being conducted simultaneously from 2 directions, from the west and from the east. Even now, it can be said that Orikiv's fate is effectively sealed. By the end of 2026, the armed forces of Ukraine will definitely not be able to hold this city. Fighting is also continuing in Kostiantynivka. Russian units are attempting to expand their bridgehead in the Verolyubivka area, where extremely intense battles are underway. It is here that the fate of Kostiantynivka is being decided to a significant extent. Sloviansk-Kramatorsk direction, the Sloviansk sector. Here, Russian forces continue offensive operations, advancing westward from the Siversk direction. Particularly fierce fighting is taking place in the Reznikivka area. Kyiv is also launching counterattacks. In effect, a serious meeting engagement is unfolding here. For several weeks now, Russian units have been trying to take the high ground south of Zakotne. So far, this has not been successful. However, the gains achieved in the Bondan area are being developed, with Russian forces pushing toward Nikiforivka. The objective is to reach the outskirts of Oleksandrivka and strike the Ukrainian grouping fighting east of that settlement in the rear. The battles here are exceptionally fierce. Naturally, Kyiv is extremely reluctant to lose key positions on the approaches to Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, the Lyman sector. Here, Russian units continue their offensive, attempting to move into the flank and rear of the Lyman grouping of the armed forces of Ukraine. The offensive is being developed west of Dibrova, as well as southeast of Yarova. According to information coming from Kyiv, Russian forces are achieving notable successes. Representatives of the armed forces of Ukraine acknowledge that at present the Lyman grouping has been almost completely cut off from supplies. Russian drones are destroying all crossings. The day before, a meeting of representatives from more than 30 countries, the so-called Coalition of the Willing, took place in Paris. The architecture of future security guarantees for Ukraine was discussed. The key issue was the possibility of deploying a Western military contingent on Ukrainian territory after the end of active hostilities. The draft documents under discussion include a US-led ceasefire monitoring mechanism, support for and restoration of the armed forces of Ukraine, the creation of multinational forces on Ukrainian territory, and commitments to assist Ukraine in the event of what is described as a new aggression by Russia. The size of the contingent is being discussed, ranging from 15 to 20,000 to 30,000 troops, depending on participating countries. The core of the force is expected to consist of French and British units. Turkey is assigned a key role in ensuring the security of maritime routes in the Black Sea. At the same time, within NATO there are countries that pose far greater risks. For example, troops could be sent to Greenland, but as they say, that is different. Naturally, Vladimir Putin will reject any such proposals. In addition, US military authorities are discussing the possibility of seizing an oil tanker which, according to intelligence data, is linked to Russia and may be transporting oil from Iran and Venezuela. That concludes my overview of the current situation on the front for today. The idea of forcibly establishing control over Greenland is shocking NATO, but does not deter Trump. Reuters. A potential military seizure of Greenland from Denmark would be a major shock for the entire North Atlantic alliance and would further deepen the rift between Donald Trump and European leaders. Neither alliance commitments within NATO nor repeated statements by Greenland itself expressing unwillingness to join the United States have served as a restraining factor for Trump as he revisits scenarios for turning the island into an American strategic stronghold in the Arctic. Following the abduction of Maduro, Trump, according to sources, was energized by this demonstration of force and once again returned to the Greenland issue, which in recent months had been on the periphery of his attention. After his statements that American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never again be questioned, the issue of Greenland returned to the center of the White House agenda. A senior official told the agency that Trump and his closest advisors are considering a wide range of options for the so-called acquisition of the island, from a direct purchase to the conclusion of a free association agreement. Such a format would not involve the formal incorporation of Greenland, with a population of about 57,000 into the United States, but would ensure de facto American control. At the same time, diplomacy and deals remain Trump's priority. If a good deal can be achieved, he will choose that path. A member of the European Parliament has initiated legal proceedings against von der Leyen over her contacts with the defense industry, Tagesspiegel. European Parliament Deputy Fabio De Masi has filed a lawsuit against the European Commission and its president, Ursula von der Leyen, demanding full and detailed disclosure of information regarding her interactions with representatives of the military-industrial complex. According to De Masi, the European Commission's responses to official parliamentary inquiries were fragmented and deliberately delayed, effectively depriving the European Parliament of the ability to exercise proper democratic oversight. In his statements, De Masi said that von der Leyen is behaving like Louis XIV, pointing to an excessive concentration of power and a closed decision-making process. He emphasized that he is seeking a court ruling that would set a precedent and strengthen lawmakers' rights to access information. The basis for the lawsuit, he claims, is the systematic evasion by the head of the European Commission of providing information about meetings, correspondence, and telephone contacts with defense corporations since mid-2024. The European Commission stated its categorical disagreement with the deputy's legal arguments while acknowledging his right to pursue judicial proceedings. The case is expected to become an important test of the limits of transparency and accountability of the EU's top leadership and could affect the balance of power between the European Parliament and the European Commission. France has begun preparing for a possible response to US military actions in Greenland, despite assurances from Washington. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, during a phone, Call assured French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot that a Venezuelan-style scenario will not be implemented in Greenland. However, these assurances were received with caution in Paris. Barrot stated that France has already begun developing response measures in the event of a possible US military operation on the Danish island. In Paris, officials believe that a position must be formulated in advance and be as convincing as possible. According to Barrot, work on possible scenarios will be completed in the coming days, after which they will be presented to key partners. He emphasized that for an effective response to the United States, Europe must rely not on declarations, but on real, well-thought-out mechanisms of influence. French diplomacy is carrying out this work in coordination with Germany and Poland, seeking to develop a unified approach and thereby strengthen its influence on decision-making at the pan-European level. That's all for today. Thank you for watching, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next update.